Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lessons from the Playroom podcast. I am so excited that I have back with me a former guest, one of my favorite people on the planet. And by the way, her last episode that we did together, which was on merging play, polyvagal theory, and sensory processing, has been one of the #1 downloaded episodes in the history of the Lessons from the Playroom podcast. So as I'm saying that, listeners, if you have not listened to it, go check it out, as well as thank you for being a part of today's conversation. So who do I have with me? I have with me the internationally acclaimed, amazing Kim Barthel. So Kim is a Canadian occupational therapist, multidisciplinary speaker, mentor, best-selling author who is active in supporting people in many contexts globally. She's passionate about understanding neurobiology, complex behavior, trauma-sensitive and neurodiverse affirming practice, sensory processing, movement, attachment, and mental health. In 2019, she was honored to receive the Award of Merit from the Canadian Association of Occupational Therapy. And with over 41 years of practice and helping people to be their best selves, she's still learning every day. Her overall mission is to support the conscious evolution of the human spirit. Hello, Kim. And Kim, can we just say you also just got another award?
Well, I have to breathe first. Oh, yes, but I have something to say to you before we
Okay.
start, in that you are also one of my favorite people in the planet.
Ah.
And this, when I speak to Lisa, my energy elevates about 6 octaves. And so my general slow and low vocal tone follows that excitement. So I'm very excited to be able to talk to you today.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for coming back.
yes, I did have the honor
Yes.
of receiving an award given to me by Attach. And it was for innovation in the treatment of children with trauma and unique needs. And thank you for saying that.
Well, yes, honor you. You deserve many, many honors, many, many. So we're going to talk about psychosensory interventions. So listeners, part of what I love about um, Kim's expertise, so Kim, I'm just going to keep bragging about you, is as an occupational therapist, Kim, you have this unique and beautiful understanding that goes far beyond what's just happening in the body. So you very much take an interdisciplinary approach to understanding what's happening. So not only are you so informed by literally what's happening in the body, but you also have a beautiful understanding of what's the connection between the mind and the body and the spirit and the body and all of these different components of the self. And I think that that interdisciplinary mindset is incredibly missing in the world of play therapy. It's missing in how we are trained. We are typically trained to look through maybe 1 or 2 lenses, but we are not really trained to look in a really, really holistic way when we are looking at our client, looking at their symptoms, getting curious about their psychology, their physiology. And so I am so excited about this conversation where we can look at psychosensory and this interplay between 2 really important parts of our being. And yeah, understanding that, how does that look from an intervention perspective? So thank you for the wholeness that you bring.
As is the case with you, it's often brought to us by our patients, our clients.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say that about play therapy, because my greatest reference of a play therapist is you. And I think of you as also very holistic in your mind. And so I guess we have a joint mission. in broadening our professions and people who support people,
Right. Exactly.
really,
Yes.
in their capacity to think in a more broad fashion of the human being in front of them, really. Psychosensory is a name that I gave to a thought process that came about by a client who I treated when I was in my late 20s.
Mm.
When I first graduated from university, I was a devotee of Dr. Jean Ayres. So, sensory integration, for those of you who don't know occupational therapy, one of our claims to fame in OT is our understanding of how sensation impacts daily function. And right out of university, sensory integration was my love. And at the time, because I'm a junior senior, now I call myself a junior senior. At the time, sensory integration wasn't very known in Canada. And so the idea that the fluffies in your socks or the elastic in your underwear or the sound of people chewing could be a variable in how you felt in your body or be dysregulated in your behavior or experience mental health related issues, that was completely foreign and unknown at the time. And in Winnipeg, where I was living, which is very cold in the wintertime, we started a project in our province to deliver services for children who were living on the street. And it was the first of its kind, especially in Western Canada. And the creator of this program came to me one day, I think I was 28, and said, "We want you to work in our program." And I said, "Well, I work with kids with autism. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with kids who experience trauma or have a different context?" And this person said, "Well, we don't know what you're going to do. You're going to figure it out." And I was very keen. I'm always keen to learn and try new things. So there was this kiddo who was crystal. He was born to a mom who was crystal meth addicted. And his mom overdosed when he was 3 weeks old. And his caregivers were his siblings, who were 8, 11, and 13. And these 4 kids lived homeless on the street of Winnipeg for 8 years, unknown to our child welfare system at the time. To me, that's inconceivable. And this little guy, he stole a chocolate bar at the 7-Eleven and was brought into care. And now he's in our program and he is in a classroom. And I'll never forget the teacher standing in front of me with her hands on her hips saying, "Get this kid out of my classroom. He is a feral animal. And you occupational therapists," she said, with a little wave in her head, you talk about all these things you do with sensation that change behavior. This kid needs to be on Ritalin. He has ADHD. This is what she said. And I was like naive and I had something to prove. So she says to me, "Take him to your magic lab," which is the sensory gym, "and do something with him." So this little guy came with me to the sensory room and he bolted in there. Intense level of activity, intensity in his eyes. And we had a very tall climbing wall. I think it was almost 12 feet high because it was a gym. And there was a foam pit at the bottom. And he climbed the climbing wall and he turned around and he fell face first into the foam pit without even putting out his arms to protect himself, just like a skydiver. And Dr. Ayres taught us the child guides treatment. Their brain knows what they need, and you set up the environment, and the child will treat themselves. This is what I learned. So I was a passive observer on the mat. I sat on the mat watching this repetitive climb, crash over and over again. And in about 20 minutes, this kiddo was lying on the mat with his hands behind his head, and he was quite present and contemplative looking in his face. And I was very proud of myself, as if I'd done anything at all, because of the shift in state. And I said, oh, look at what proprioceptive input does. And the vestibular system has informed his nervous system, and he is present. Then my big learning experience came. This 8-year-old boy left the gym, went up to the unit where he was living at the time, and tried to hang himself. And he didn't succeed, and was able, with such elegance over time, able to communicate what happened. That in that experience of climbing and crashing and climbing and crashing, the words I would put to it, landed in his body. And in that landing came re-experiencing and memory. This was a long time ago, long before we used this language. And I was terrified that I had done something wrong, thinking that the sensory information was the wrong thing to do. And for the next 15 years in that particular environment, I happened to have the luxury of working with a psychotherapist, play therapist, and we collaborated. And I saw, my job at the time was to watch the body, while my colleague made sense out of the experience. And of course, we learned from each other. And this was the beginning of me seeing how, when the body is available, the dots line up to the mind to allow the child to make more sense out of the experiences that they've had. And that story kind of captures the feeling of why that name was given to these concepts. And a beautiful ending to that story is that that young child is now a social worker in that program.
Wow.
And, still talks about the importance of embodiment.
Yeah.
So this is where I think you and I share our interest,
Mm.
is this meeting of what's happening within,
Yes.
both interoceptively, in connection to the world, in connection to the self.
Yeah.
And the feelings and the thoughts that go with that.
Yeah. Such a beautiful story. Emotional in many ways, but emotional from the almost like the remembrance or the recognition of just how significant the body is and how it's often not paid attention to. That's where the emotion comes up for me when I think about your story, and I'm reflecting on, like, play therapists, we aren't typically trained in the body. We look at the play as the carrier of the information, which it does carry information, but so does the body. And so this beautiful interplay of, but if you like, there's two places to look. There's more than two places to look. But as play therapists, if we're just focusing on the play, we really are potentially missing where the story lives.
Mm.
Because the story doesn't live in the plastic dollhouse or the wooden dollhouse, right? The story doesn't live in the puppet. The story doesn't live, it's an expression of the story, but that's not where the story lives, right? The story lives in the body. That's how I like to think of it.
Well, I know that you and I have had the chance to collaborate.
We have.
And when we watch play,
Yes.
there are different pieces, like different spokes on the bicycle wheel of holism that you and I would see. Things like I would look at what is happening at the pelvic floor.
Right.
How is the child's alignment in their body? Do they collapse in their diaphragm? Do they increase the tension in their shoulder? What happens in their jaw? That while they are engaged in the play activity, I actually know you look at these things too, but while they're engaged in their play activity, you are able to track simultaneously
Yeah.
not only the information, the psychological information, but the accompanying signals of state that are communicated through the postural system, through the hands, through the eyes, through the orienting response. There's so much simultaneous information that's sort of alongside or integrated with what the child is doing at the same time.
So should we share a little bit about the case that we worked on together?
I think that would be fun.
Let's talk about that. And when we can talk about it from the different perspectives, we can talk about some of the pieces that you observed and what I was observing simultaneously. And we can just sort of unpack that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So for our listeners, there was a mom and her son who made the journey out to Boulder, Colorado, actually, and agreed to do a full weekend experience with Kim and I. Kim also came down from Boulder. And Kim, we went into this not knowing a whole lot, having no plan attached to this, but this child was struggling. There were some concerns. And we really went in with this place of curiosity of, let's see what emerges, and then let's see what you see, let's see what I see, and then let's just work with what emerges as it emerges in real, in real time. So that's just to set the stage for us to talk this through. So where should we start?
Well, I think what you've said is actually really important for listeners, because none of this work is a planned work. When this attitude of curiosity that you just spoke about is not just a mental curiosity, but a physiological curiosity within you. And I know that you speak about this all the time in the examples that you give around, I feel you in me.
Yeah.
That this attuned state that is part of the curiosity of our intention is actually comes back to the question of, how do I show up as the clinician as my best self so that I can be a receptacle that is available to the information in my own body in connection with you. And so this is very different than coming with an agenda or a formalized assessment, which I think can be frustrating at first when you're trying to learn these ideas, that there is a dual attention. What's going on with the child? And then when there's you, me, the parent, and the child, right? There's this collaborative feel that goes on that is a synergy between 4 nervous systems.
Exactly.
And is quite an elegant dance.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for the listener to hear that this creation, although it sounds like we're just going to show up and see. It's a lot more of, here we are with a full intentionality of bringing our whole selves together with a very powerful, curious stance. Yeah. Curiosity allows information to come in that judgment would not.
Yeah. So I want to speak to already I want to say a little bit about intention from my perspective. Like what for in my mind, is there an is there an ultimate intention? Like what am I intending other than to be present and to be curious? Because there is a something in there for me. And I'm curious if this is similar for you. And for me, the intention is ultimately around connection. So this sort of larger aim, although I don't want to make it sound like a goal, but like this larger aim of how do I follow what's unfolding on the journey to support myself and my client in being able to be connected to themselves wholly in this present moment.
Mm.
Because I really believe that so much of what we experience is feedback, that we're not connected to ourselves wholly in this present moment.
I mean, you're describing healing, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the beautiful quotes that I love is Jill Bolte Taylor, who wrote My Stroke of Insight.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about the 90-second rule, which is emotions, the physiology of emotions, lasts no more than 90 seconds. However, if we bypass, suppress, or skip out, or dissociate in those, or think and analyze in those moments of experiences, that neural chemistry can live in us for 90 years.
Yeah.
And so connection allows that body, and this is my example of my story of my kid, who I'm going to call David. If I had done that differently, there would have been relationship and connection so that he could feel his experience in a new way. Yeah. In a co-regulated, supportive, present, comfortably uncomfortable place.
So just to highlight what you said, his body knew what it needed to do to help him connect with himself. However, the moment that he became present with himself, it was so big that there wasn't a container for it. And I'm hearing you say that then the part of our work, or the work in that moment with David, if you could have done like a redo, would have been that intervention was beautiful. And for there to have been something to receive him connecting to himself when he landed into his body.
Yes. And that's relationship.
Right.
But connected.
Connected relationship.
Available. Yeah. I'm with you. I feel you. I see you. Relationship. Safety.
Safety. And interestingly enough, that was really the crux of what we found with our little person that we worked with together. So there, from his experience, there was some birth trauma. There were some things early on, and he had not landed into his body. So let's talk about how you knew that and how I knew that as the play and the therapy started to unfold.
The first thing that I look for is how the child actually moves through space. Mm-hmm. And that means, can they stay still? Mm-hmm. And staying still is not in the mind. It's, can their body hold on and stay put against gravity? Mm-hmm. And our little friend, he struggled with that. He had to lean against things, constantly shift his weight. When he would talk, there would be excessive emotion and motion. Hmm. And most people might identify that or call that an ADHD profile. Mm-hmm. And labels don't help me. I'm more curious about what is the functional adaptive response of what that is doing for that nervous system in order for it to be as competent as it can be in this moment.
Yeah.
So I was tracking a lot of his postural movements and how they were aligning or not aligning with what he was saying, with what he was sharing with us, and how often the more emotional the topic or the more evocative the topic, the more his postural system would have fallout in it. And I was looking for that across the time that we were there.
I remember his body would collapse. It was really hard for him to sit upright. Right? There was, almost like his midsection was loosey goosey. Wasn't able to, like you said, hold. His body wasn't able to hold with gravity. And yes, okay, so that was one of the things that you were looking for. One of the pieces that I was looking for was how he played. Did he play? What are some clues around emotional age? And then back to what we had talked about before, what is the feeling that is arising in the room in relationship with him? So what is his nervous system trying to communicate with my nervous system, with his mother's nervous system, with your nervous system, and attuning to the information in his nervous system? And a couple things that I noticed were that he didn't know how to play. He wasn't in, sort of imaginary thinking. He was very concrete. He didn't have play flexibility. He did not know how to play in a way that would be considered sort of appropriate. And I don't really like that word, but you know what I'm saying, in terms of milestones for his age and his typicality as would typically be studied. So his play already indicated to me that he was not his developmental age, that emotionally he was much, 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 much younger.
And Lisa, what was deceiving about that for me was his vocabulary.
Oh, yes.
And his social engagement skills were that of an adult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he was very attuned, connect, like he wanted to connect. Very, very pleasing.
Very pleasing. Yeah.
In his nature.
Mm-hmm.
And his intellectual capacity was very high.
Yes.
And so there's that split between conceptualization and topics that he could share and talk about, with a lot of social finesse that didn't match, both what was going in the body and what was going on in his play.
Exactly. So the feeling that was arising in the room was one of, we are in the intellectual mental realm. We are talking about it. We are, intellectualizing it. We are very in our head. And from a sensation perspective, so in Synergetic Play Therapy, we call this the offering, right? It was actually challenging as the clinician to notice my own body. Yeah. So I found myself wanting to join him at the intellectual realm. So, and that's what happens is the nervous system and the protective pattern offers information so others can feel what's going on in the nervous system and what those protective patterns are. So just noticing in my own physiology, wow, I'm noticing this continual pull to go upward in me, to go up. Where are my legs? Where's my body? Where are my feet? So feeling that helped me feel that there wasn't a connection with the body. So we could observe it in his body, that he wasn't connected in his body, but we could feel in the room relationally that he wasn't connected with his body, and his play or lack of also helped bring in that insight. Oh, we are much younger, which also then helped us be able to look back and say, what happened early on? Sort of the clues. Where should we look? Oh, we have some birth trauma here. Might
You know,
that have contributed to not
and
feeling safe to land in the body?
completely, completely. And one of the things that I remember having to be careful about was getting distracted.
Uh-huh.
That the pull into the dialogue and the connection was so the word is almost seductive. It was just so tempting to just hang out and have a conversation with this guy
Yeah.
because he was so charming. That just speaks to,
Mhm.
it spoke to me of the strategy that he survives by,
Right.
and it made me forget my body.
Exactly. 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 And then we can bring in the element with his mom, who also struggled at times to be connected to her body. And so here then is this relational dance between mom and son, where they're both trying to be embodied, and there's a struggle to be embodied, and both, in a sense, offering each other the experience of, I'm not in my body. And you could see actually the trauma pattern between the two of them, because mom was also part of the birth, right?
Yes.
So their birth story played out relationally between the both of them, which was also a piece then that we got to work with. And
There was an amazing variable in this story
Mhm.
that the audience needs to hear, that is just fascinating.
Yeah.
That this guy
Mhm.
is going to be a world-class rock climber,
Oh,
right? He is just enamored and needs to go rock climbing on the wall every day. That was, here they were visiting you from another state, and that's what they had to find in the evening. And what's so interesting about the sensation of rock climbing is how much you push through your toes,
uh-huh.
which is such a big part of the birthing process,
Mhm.
and the sense of activation
Mhm.
of the inner core, which is what keeps your posture up against gravity.
Yeah.
So that little piece of evidence also gave me this, oh my gosh, what keeps him here in some organized fashion is his love of an activity that he's repeating over and over again, that just didn't quite maybe suffice in the very first attempt.
Yes, exactly. That innate wisdom of the body to pull you towards what it knows that it needs. Yeah. Um, I'm guessing our listeners would love us just to keep unpacking and unpacking and unpacking, like what happened and like where did this go and this, and this whole thing. I want to give a quick sort of, where we ended up going, and then just highlight again this interplay that we're talking about between the mind and the body and all of that. So from a play perspective, there was an important piece. I just mentioned that he didn't know how to play yet. And so in terms of like meeting the client where they're at, there was an unfolding that had to take place. He had to be born at first, so to speak, right? He had to come back into his body first before we could go into the world of emotion. And I think that's an important piece, because a lot of play therapists want to jump straight into the world of emotion, but he's not in his body enough to be able to even regulate through those, which is why when a emotion would arise, he literally couldn't hold it. His body couldn't hold it. It was too much, or he'd start talking about something from an intellectual perspective or crack a joke or something like that. And so there was this piece around allowing him to land in his body first. And then as he's landing in his body, slowly expanding his window of tolerance for the sensation and energy that then he was experiencing in his body. And then as we did that, there was a natural shift that began to happen in the play. And I think that's important for play therapists to hear, that there really is this developmental progression that happens. And I know a lot of play therapists might be thinking, oh, I've never tracked like this before. It's happening in your playroom, whether you know it or not. Kim and I are highlighting something because the body knows, the child knows. If you're allowing an unfolding to happen, there is a growing up that's naturally emerging anyway. But I just want to name it. That was part of the process from my perspective, was he had to land first. We had to work with the body first before we could work with the emotional world, not from sensation perspective, but from a feeling perspective. And the play naturally then started to unfold from there.
I remember, Lisa, there was a poignant moment, which will really illustrate what you've just said, where he was quite encapsulated and contained, you use that word, by a piece of lycra around his body, kind of like a womb. And he started to cry.
Right.
This very intellectual, presenting, happy individual landed not only in sensing himself, but feeling. And the play after that, it was almost like a flower that opened, because it wasn't something that had to be taught.
Yeah.
It was in him to find. And that sort of convergence between knowing myself, feeling myself, and lining it up into understanding and expression, it kind of all came together like a swirl. And even as I reflect on it, it was pretty incredible how our curiosity and wondering it just happened in front of our eyes.
Yeah. Without the agenda.
Without the agenda.
Without the agenda. So Kim, how can we land? What are the key places here of what do we want our listeners to land on? What are those key pieces?
I think the feeling of really the embodied clinician, which is the thing that you and I share in our belief, is that the more that we feel us, the less cognitive we approach all this.
Yeah.
Or the more we integrate that wisdom from within us with cognition. It's not one or the other, it's an integrated approach. So it's the ongoing discovery of feeling my feelings. When someone says to you, well, how are you? And you just describe it, but when it's coming from deep within you.
Yeah.
Versus when it's just words that are coming out of your mouth.
Yeah.
And so I feel that that's the key to the mastery, might be the word, of putting all these different pieces together. What do you think?
I think there's this parallel piece around, we're talking about how there's wisdom in our clients' bodies, but can we also allow the wisdom of our own bodies unfold and take us to where we need to go, and to trust what our body is leading us towards. And if there's something that our body really wants to experience, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's hanging off the bed upside down, maybe it's you just have the urge to just grab a bunch of pillows and wrap yourself in pillows. Maybe it's the urge to, you want something from a textural perspective, you want to eat something with a particular texture, you're like craving something cold. It's like I think sometimes we dismiss so much of the signals of our body. I think sometimes we dismiss it because sometimes maybe the urges that we have feel childish or silly, or what would someone think if they came and looked at us and we're wrapped up and covered in blankets and pillows and this and that, or shoved ourselves into a corner somewhere, or whatever it is. And it's like, I I get it that there's been some social conditioning for us to not listen to our bodies, but can we actually come back? Be curious about what the conversation is that's happening inward. Yeah. So good, Kim. Love my time with you. Love my time with you.
And look forward to what we create in the
Yes,
future.
exactly. So listeners, I hope that this conversation has piqued your curiosity. And maybe next time you have a session, if you are typically just play focused, maybe take some moments of observing the client's body and just becoming curious about what's the story in the body and what's the body trying to show. Just be curious, just watch, just observe, right? Be curious, and be curious about your own bodies as well. So wherever you are in the world, you are the most important toy in the playroom. So take care of yourselves. Until next time.